So we have arrived in California. First time using a US supercharger. California is just packed full of Teslas. The touchscreen is noticeably bigger. And if we forgot that we were in America for just one moment, so we got to the airport at some ungodly hour in the morning, and the first person I see when we walk into the lounge is Paul Marrick from Car Expert, and I thought about going up to him and getting a photo and saying hi, and he drives the Tesla Model Y, as you probably know, but then I thought it's too early in the morning to be bothering people for photos. So we got on our first flight, which was Melbourne to Sydney, so domestic first before we do the big international flight. And we actually had some pretty decent food on that flight, which was unexpected. And I found out that your taste buds change when you're in an aeroplane because of the altitude. So they add all these extra things to like the hot food on a plane. Anyway, it tasted good. And once we touched down in Sydney, we had to get the transfer bus from the domestic terminal to the international terminal. And as we were pulling in, we went right past our Qantas A380 that we were about to get on, which was like beyond belief how massive this plane is. We then got comfy in our seats. Massive shout out to my dad, who decided to use his Qantas points to upgrade our seats. So we had business class for the 14-hour flight, which was so incredible. We got to watch the plane take off through the tail camera in the A380, which reminded me of like bringing up the camera on a Tesla screen. Paige took no time to hesitate into getting into her Qantas PJs. So overall, we were very excited to not only be in business class and living it up, but also the fact that we were like flying directly then at that point to Los Angeles. And whilst it was a long flight, we didn't have to then jump on like another flight to New York like we've done in the past. But obviously the A380 uses a shitload of fuel. So we were kind of thinking all of those clean kilometers we've done in our Tesla have now just been absolutely by this single flight to Los Angeles. So yeah, not ideal. And then 14 hours later, we arrived in LAX. We were pretty sleep deprived, and we jumped on a bus which takes you to like the Hertz area. And arriving at Hertz was an interesting experience. Everyone was really friendly, which was great, but there was almost this kind of like over the top friendliness. And we started to realize that maybe the reason that people are like so over the top friendly is because they're expecting to get a tip. So that was a little bit confusing for us to navigate. Anyway, so we walk into our car, there's heaps of Teslas, which is so cool. And so ours was a blue Model Y with a black interior, and straight away we could see that it was banged up and damaged, you know, the front, the side, the rear. The inside of the car smelled like donuts, which was kind of weird. I don't know if that was a fragrance that they were using or someone had just got out of the car with fresh donuts. The hydraulics in the boot were clearly damaged as well. So like, it was a weird experience because coming from our Model Y that's like immaculately looked after, to get in a Tesla that was like somewhat abused by previous renters felt like a bit wrong. Now, I've done a whole video on the experience of driving on the wrong side of the road for us for the first time, so check that out if you haven't seen that yet. But generally speaking, as soon as we started to get on the roads, the first thing that we noticed was just how many Model X's and S's there were, because we don't see that many down under in Australia. Every set of lights, you'd look around you and there's a 3 and a Y and sometimes an S and an X. It's like California is just packed full of Teslas, which is really, really exciting for someone like myself. I knew there'd be a lot of Model Ys and 3s in California, but I wasn't expecting this many Model S's. The other thing that we noticed was the massive trucks on the road. Like, yes, you've got your Ford F-150s, but then you've got like all these modded trucks that have like 2 sets of wheels and lifted really high, and they wouldn't be road legal in Australia. Very strange to see that. I would say that the manners on the roads, everyone seemed to be a bit more polite than they are in Australia. So you'd indicate, someone would let you in. I never felt that anyone was like really aggressive, whereas at least here in the country in Victoria, everyone's always up your ass. They're trying to like get around you. Everyone's impatient, but we certainly didn't get that over there. Everyone seemed to be pretty respectful. We then had our first stop in Malibu, which was really, really nice. And they had a Tesla showroom there. They had Tesla superchargers there. We saw a Rivian and a Lucid within the first 1 minute of pulling in, and brand new Range Rovers that we don't have in Australia. And so we go into Whole Foods and definitely made Coles and Woolworths seem a little bit shit in comparison. And of course, I had to go into the showroom. They had a brand new Model X Plaid. I did double check with the salesperson at the Tesla showroom to make sure there was no chance I could test drive an X or an S while I was here, but yeah, unfortunately, you need to have a valid US driver's license. So we then continued along the coast, and at this point, I was just so tired. The time difference was screwing us up, and Paige was falling asleep in the passenger seat. So we had to make a call that we're gonna have to pull over and have like a power nap. So we pull into this national park, we put the seats down in the Model Y, and bang, lights out. We luckily put a timer on because it felt like 10 seconds, but it had been 30 minutes. But this is where things started to get really pretty. So you basically move off the coast and you cut through the mountains to get towards the highway that takes you to Santa Barbara. And it's windy and swervy and up and down, and the Model Y just handled it perfectly. At this point, I started to notice the performance difference with the long range, given that we've got the rear wheel drive back home. You could feel that there was certainly a bit more acceleration behind the pedal. The battery definitely has this like whining sound that we keep noticing, which is very different to what we're used to in our standard range. And we're not sure if it's because this is the different battery in the longer range, or because whether it's a Hertz vehicle and it's just been abused by everyone before us. The other strange thing about the roads over there, which is very evident on the highway, is just everyone going beyond the speed limit. That's not something that happens in Australia. I've heard that it's best to just go with the flow of traffic and not worry too much about like the speed limit, which sounds weird, but that's what we kind of ended up doing. Was we start to increase our speed so we matched everyone else around us, so we weren't like holding too many people up. So we arrived at our hotel in Santa Barbara, which was really cool. It's called Drift Hotel. It's basically all like self-service, so you let yourself in with a code. There's all these beautiful rooms. You just check in and check out on your own accord. Okay, so we have arrived in California, as you can see by the beautiful palm trees behind me. And I think the coolest thing about being here so far, or the most surreal, is every time you look away from the beach, you just see these huge mountains, like they basically the whole way along the coast from LA to San Fran. And yeah, it really makes you feel like you're in a different part of the world, because we've not seen mountains like this before. And the fact that they're so close to all the cities, kind of like, yeah, it's pretty cool. Every place we went to, we had amazing vegan options. We had scoped out the best places to go, but generally speaking, the food was very expensive. Like even just takeaway coffees and takeaway food was insanely expensive once you did the conversion, and often sometimes you'd be adding a 10%, 15% tip as well. But that being said, the food was really good. We had great food in Santa Barbara. We had falafel burgers that were like all organic. We went out to this restaurant called Oliver's, which was actually the highlight, or one of the highlights of our entire trip. Incredible atmosphere, fully booked out, fully vegan, but we discovered this township of Montecito where like all the celebrities live. Oprah lives there, Harry and Meghan live there, and the shopping and the restaurants and the cars, like I saw a Rivian R1T there, and I saw Rolls-Royce 4 drives, McLarens. Like it was clearly the place to be, but we didn't know that until our last day. So once we discovered this area, we spent a bit of time there, we did shopping, we went to the beach. Butterfly Beach is beautiful. It's equivalent to the beaches that we would get here in Australia. And the houses around there were really something else. Like if you've been to Portsea in Victoria, it's like that, but a whole nother level. The other thing that's so cool in America is just how many supercharging stations there are around town. It makes it super easy for us with this rental to just stop in at different supercharging locations. We then went to the first supercharger location in Santa Barbara. It was the first time we were charging the car, and it was at the top of a car park. It was absolutely packed compared to what we have back home. There was so many stalls, a heap of different Teslas charging up. Everyone seemed to be just hanging out in their cars, which we don't do as much back home. I completely forgot that they've got a different plug over there. So as soon as I grabbed the cable, I was like, oh wow, it's like literally half the size, if not more, than CCS. All right, first time using a US supercharger. It's a lot smaller than our CCS. It's not nearly as bulky. It's so much easier to just plug in compared to what we have back home, which is like this giant thing in comparison. And the way that they charge you with Hertz when you supercharge is that at the end, it just bills the credit card that you did the booking with. I would have liked to be able to set up the app so I could get potentially like the free charging miles that I've got. I know that Hertz are now in the process of rolling out app integration, which would be so awesome. We didn't have that. We missed out by like a week. I tried to force a software update on the car to see if I could get the QR code to come up, and then we could have access via the app. But all we had was the key card, the one key card that Hertz give you. And you realize that this is actually worse than having a key fob, because you need to walk around to the driver's door every time to unlock it. You need to put it in the console in order to drive away. And given that California was quite warm when we were there, like massive difference in temperature, it was like 30 degrees every day there. We were missing the app in terms of like preconditioning the car and checking in on Sentry mode and venting the windows, all of that stuff. You realize how much you value the Tesla app when you don't have it. The view from the top of this car park that had the supercharging was beautiful. We did a lot of driving around and footage and filming and did some TikToks there. Follow me on TikTok if you don't already. And then going back to the hotel, we realized how expensive overnight car parking was. So the parking is also quite expensive here in downtown Santa Barbara. It's $25 US per day. So for the 3 days that we've been here, what did I say that adds up to? So that's 75. Yeah, so that's $112 Australian worth of just random all day parking here in what is essentially like, it's a busy spot, but like it just feels weird to have to pay that much for parking. That's like one night of a hotel room in Melbourne. Yeah, crazy. One of the highlights in Santa Barbara was going to the massive Tesla showroom that they have there. I was then able to see the full lineup of cars. I was able to sit in a Model S for the first time. Wow, this is very cool. The touchscreen is noticeably bigger and it feels like a higher resolution or something. So yeah, that's a massive perk of having one of these models. And that one actually had the new round steering wheel, which was unusual to see. I still think I would prefer the yoke. The yoke seems amazing to me. I went back in the showroom and spent some time in the Model X, and having those like taptic buttons for the indicators on the steering wheel, it all felt really smart to me. But I didn't get a chance to drive one, so that could completely change my mind. But just overall, the interior of the S and the X, the new models, felt really luxe. Like, I think anyone would be super happy with the quality of interior that you're getting. The quality of the screen and the size of it feels like a really big upgrade on what we've got in our Model Y, which up until this point I thought was best in class. But the one in the S and the X is flush and it tilts and it feels more vibrant, and the outside of the cars are just beautiful. Like, updated rear on the X with the Tesla badging looks great. The rear taillights on that Model S. Any Model S that doesn't have the updated taillights looks so dated now, which is unfortunate, but it's such a really well-designed update to the rear of that car that makes it look really aggressive. I think if we had the Model S here, whether it's plaid or not, it would be really hard to resist that car. I definitely couldn't afford it, but it would be such an amazing car to drive on the daily. I forgot to look out for hardware for and check if any of the cars in the lot had the upgraded cameras. I didn't even check if the ones in the showroom did. I'm assuming they probably did. We then belted around the corner and went to our second supercharging destination just to top up and see what it was like. At this point, we've basically just kept the AC running the whole time. I mean, pretty much throughout our entire trip, every time we get out of the car, we'd click the keep option so the car would stay cool. Noticed a nice modded Tesla Model Y there, which you see a lot of in America. And if we forgot that we were in America for just one moment, the local sports store to that supercharger was fully stocked with guns. So that was a bit of a wake-up call for us. Quite the shock seeing that. Bit different to like Rebel Sport here. At this point, driving around Santa Barbara, I was starting to get a bit more comfortable with the roads and all the different turns that you need to do. But then there was the stop sign situation, which was the first time we had seen this in Santa Barbara. So you come to an intersection and everyone has a stop sign. All right, so we come to a stop, suss what's happening, and then we're going. See ya! And so everyone stops, and then it's kind of like the next person in line goes. Very strange, we don't have anything like that here. So that took a bit to work out what was happening. And then before we knew it, it was time to pack up at Santa Barbara and head towards San Luis Obispo, where the Tesla Takeover event was. We don't have nearly the amount of charges that you guys have.